MPs were back in their seats in Ottawa today, and among other things, they heard a prime minister sounding conciliatory, almost nonpartisan, on the debate surrounding the Afghanistan mission. Stephen Harper, conciliatory, nonpartisan.
We don't want to be accused of trying to spring these things on Mr. Dion. We understand he has a difficult decision to make. Before I kind of lay out timing and some of those other considerations in any detail, I would like to share some of our thinking with him on that.
You have two parties in this House who want to continue to have a role for Canada past February 2009. But there is a gulf of differences about how we see things.
For one thing, the Liberals want an end to the combat role after 2009. For another, they want a definite end date for the mission.
Timeline is necessary because it gives the incentive for everyone to come with targets and to deliver something that will avoid for Canada to be in a ever-ending mission.
The Liberals want to stay in Afghanistan post-2009 as long as there's no combat. Is that possible?
Well, certainly if you're in Canada, you're going to be in combat operations. And you are there, you're in combat operations. The Afghan army is not yet capable enough to be able to handle security by itself. If it was, we would have already have completed our job. And the Afghans need a support there right now. So if you're there, you're going to be in the middle of a firefight some way or other.
The government motion on the future of the mission in Afghanistan is straightforward and closely mirrors the recommendations of the Manley Report. The motion proposes to extend Canada's combat mission, but only if NATO comes up with 1,000 more troops and Canadian soldiers get medium-lift helicopters and unmanned aerial surveillance drones. And the motion calls for a review of the mission in 2011. The Liberals want an end to the combat mission next February.
At the end of the day, the decision on the future of the military mission in Afghanistan is a question of leadership. It requires other parties to make a simple decision. Either you support the military mission in Afghanistan or you don't.
We cannot become a two-tiered alliance of those willing to fight and those who are not. Such a development, with all of its implications for collective security, would effectively destroy the alliance.
What about that warning from Gates? How bad was it in NATO with all of these countries, 3 million soldiers between them, unable to come up with any help for Canadians?
Well, Craig, there is concern, of course, that we have what's been deemed by some to be a two-tier NATO evolving. Canada is a first-tier country. We've been part of this mission in Afghanistan, which you know is NATO-led, but it has a UN sanctioning. It's a multilateral, multinational effort, and this is not an exclusive club. We're hoping other countries will join the RC South countries, and we'll be able to operate in a more fulsome way, which is the way the alliance was initially set up.
But at the moment, what is one to think of NATO? Germany is the strongest economy in Europe. There are the Spanish, there are the Italians. All of them have large armies, especially the Germans. Why aren't they willing to pitch in?
Well, Craig, there are things like constitutions, coalition governments, caveats. All of those are in place. Do we like that? No. Would we prefer that countries like Germany and Spain and others come forward? Yes, by all means. And those discussions, those very pointed discussions took place, and they'll continue.
This doesn't all sound very encouraging. I got to tell you, you go over there, we have to create so much trouble internationally with our allies just to get 1,000 troops to help us in a very difficult fight that's going on against the Taliban. Are you leaving there? How can you possibly be leaving there feeling very optimistic?
Well, Craig, we don't have any choice. This is an international mission that requires the full effort of NATO. We have to be insistent on that, and I think we've been very direct. There are questions that remain for other parties as to how far they're willing to go, and this shouldn't be a partisan issue. It shouldn't be an election issue. It should be something that Canadians should rally behind, and we're hopeful that we're going to see that kind of backing in the days ahead.
Mr. Dion, you heard the interview. Your impressions of what Mr. McKay had to say?
I think in my mind, how far we would be today if the government would have listened what we were proposing last year. In the motion April 2007, we proposed that Canada notify NATO right away that the combat mission in Kandahar for Canada will end in February 2009, and that we need to work for a rotation. At that time, Mr. McKay, Mr. Harper said, no, the mission is going well, we don't need to do that. And now, a year after, they are saying, oh, you know what, the mission is not going well at all. If we don't have additional support from NATO, we will pull out.
Well, you've got another motion now that you're going to have to deal with. That motion was outlined by the Harper Tories on Friday, and it talks about keeping the troops there until 2011 in a combat mission. And your position is no combat mission after 2009. Is there any compromise here, Mr. Dion, or are we going to be forced into an election on this issue?
We came there for 1 year at the beginning, from 2006 to 2007 for a combat mission. After Mr. Harper decided to extend it 2 years more, until February 2009. He negotiated nothing with our allies, with the government of Afghanistan, with the neighboring countries. He said in a macho way, we'll do it. And now he realized that it's unfair for men and women in uniform. It's not something that we should carry unless we have more support from NATO. And now he's asking for a blank check to have 3 years more.
Your position doesn't make much sense, because how can you deliver development? How can you deliver aid? How can you help the Afghan people without having that security? And that means combat to me. And I think that's why Canadians are having trouble with what you're saying, because your position doesn't make any sense.
No, I think Canadians understand our position. It is the rotation process. You will have a country or a set of countries that will do the combat after Canada did it during 3 years. And Canada then will be able to focus its efforts elsewhere for other tasks in Kandahar and elsewhere in Afghanistan.
What are the tasks
for other tasks than combat. It makes sense.
What tasks, though,
it makes
Mr.
sense.
Dion?
Many countries are doing that today. Some countries are in the combat, others are focusing on other tasks for development and reconstruction. This is the way it was supposed to be. When Canada has been convinced to take this combat mission, it was for a timeline.
The Liberal Party has formally presented its position on the future of the Canadian military mission in Afghanistan.
The mission must change. The mission must have a clear end date, and the mission must be about more than the military. These are the three principles of this motion. We will not micromanage the military. It is for them to determine how to implement this new mission. The government of Canada must immediately notify NATO that Canada will end its military presence in Kandahar as of February 1st, 2011. And as of that date, the deployment of the Canadian Forces troops out of Kandahar will start as soon as possible, so that it will have been completed by July 1st, 2011.
We will obviously examine all of their proposals in detail before responding to all of them. But I think this is important progress that has been made. I remind all of you that the government established the Manley Panel last fall with the express intention of bringing a bipartisan or nonpartisan consensus to this particular mission. We will look at these in great detail with the express intention of trying to find common ground. But I think this is a positive development and one that I think is moving the debate in the right direction.
The Liberal motion makes no mention that there be no combat role post-2009. Is this enough movement in your mind to fashion a compromise?
One of the things I'm encouraged about in this motion is that it backs away from any suggestion that we would dictate operational decisions to military commanders on the ground. Afghanistan is an extremely dangerous environment, and I don't think it is realistic that military commanders would be phoning 24 Sussex every other day to ask whether they could undertake, certain operations or not other operations. So I think the fact that the Liberal Party has backed away from any suggestion of that, I think, is a positive development.
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that the Prime Minister is coming to the Liberal position on Afghanistan.
Yesterday we made our position clear on Afghanistan, but it's the government's position that remains confused. Mr. Speaker, we have spoken clearly on Afghanistan. When will the Prime Minister begin to catch up?